Google just dropped a native Gemini desktop app for macOS 15 and above. It launches globally and free on day one, summoning with option space. Crucially, this version reads any Windows contents to answer contextually, and it also ships image generation via Nano Banana and video rendering via VO. This deployment throws Google deep into the ring for the ambient assistant slot, specifically targeting Apple hardware. This matters right now because the AI race isn't just about the model size, it's about the integration point. Google knows Apple's own intelligence stack is coming, and they need to establish dominance on the operating system level before the OS vendor fully deploys its own killer features. They are staking their claim on the user's desktop environment, not just the search bar. This isn't just another fancy API wrapper. The ability to read any Windows contents fundamentally changes the utility contract. You aren't asking Gemini a question. You are pointing it at a screen full of data and asking it to synthesize an answer. Consider a developer trying to debug code across 3 different terminals. Gemini could theoretically ingest all 3 and pinpoint the conflict, saving hours of manual copy-pasting. This moves the AI from being a helpful co-pilot to a true information synthesizer. When we talk about builders, the immediate second-order effect is workflow compression. We are moving toward environments where the computational layer vanishes, and the AI simply knows the context of what you are doing. This directly challenges established paradigms like Microsoft Copilot, which tends to live inside the corporate suite by being ambient and system-level. Google is treating the OS itself as the prompt. They want the default, always-on utility that every user defaults to, bypassing the need for dedicated apps or complex workflows. The fact that it's free and global on day one is a massive adoption play, maximizing the attack surface against any competitor. This aggressively positioned release tells every company building product on macOS. The integration point is the ultimate battleground. You must assume that ambient, context-aware AI is the baseline expectation, not a premium feature. Developers must shift focus from building isolated features to architecting entire system flows around these new contextual AI APIs. The next wave of product differentiation won't come from better UI, but from superior context ingestion. Google forced the hand of the platform owners, and now every competitor must race to match or exceed this level of system intimacy. OpenAI just dropped GPT-5.4. And according to the stats, it's claiming the crown, hitting a composite benchmark score of 92. That number puts it ahead of Gemini 3.1 Pro and Claude Opus 4.6, suggesting they've finally nailed the all-arounder title. They're also throwing out a massive 1 million token context window, which is a big number if you're keeping track. This whole leaderboard thing, with every major lab claiming they own a different niche, one for reasoning, one for coding, one for general work, it's getting intense. It used to be that you needed a specialist model for a specific job, and you used it. Now, the playing field is getting flatter, and the race isn't about who is best at one thing, but who can do everything well enough to ship a product. The 83% GDP Val score, which measures computer use tasks, is basically the industry way of saying, this thing can handle the real, messy work of an office or a factory floor. But we gotta pump the brakes on the hype machine for a second. Nobody's building a product because of a benchmark score. Builders are building because they have a user problem, and they need a predictable, reliable output. The ability to process 1 million tokens isn't a feature, it's a capacity. What matters is whether the model can maintain coherence and accuracy across that massive context when you ask it to follow a complex, multi-step workflow that spans thousands of lines of documentation or hours of conversation history. The market is realizing that the era of single-purpose, single-task models is over. We're moving into the era of the general-purpose, high-capacity cognitive engine. This means the focus shifts from calling out the highest score to stress-testing the model's reliability when the pressure is on, when the user is actually trying to make money with it. So, what should you take away from this noise? Don't get distracted by which lab has the highest number today. Instead, focus your dev time on the integration layer. The biggest bottleneck isn't the raw intelligence of the model. It's the tooling, the prompting, and the guardrails you wrap around it that make it trustworthy in a production environment. The money's going to flow to the builders who can take this massive, powerful, slightly unpredictable generalist engine and make it behave like a dependable, boring employee who just happens to be brilliant. The number $12.7 billion. That's the valuation Shield AI just hit, closing a $1.5 billion Series G raise. You gotta stop and think about what that figure means, because it signals a massive, accelerating appetite for autonomy software, specifically the kind that operates in environments that are anything but controlled. This isn't just another funding round. It's a declaration that the money is flowing hard into defense-adjacent AI, and it's changing who owns the narrative in the sector. Why does this matter now, beyond just the big headlines? Because the market is maturing past the proof-of-concept stage. We've seen enough demos, enough videos of autonomous systems working in a simulated environment to prove the tech works. The money now, the serious, multi-billion-dollar money, is going to the teams that can bridge the gap between that demo real and actual, reliable deployment in the field. That transition requires something far tougher than a good pitch deck. It requires hardened, real-world operational capability. This whole funding package is fundamentally reshaping the competitive map, making it clear that the roster of top players in this space just got a lot deeper. For us builders, for those of us shipping actual products, this is a critical signal. We can't afford to treat autonomy as a buzzword we slap on a pitch deck. The investment thesis here is that dual-use autonomy software, the stuff that can work in a military scenario, but also in a complex civilian infrastructure, is the gold standard. If you're building something for commercial use, you need to start thinking about the requirements that defense systems demand: reliability under extreme duress, integration with legacy hardware, and proven resilience when the network goes down. You can't build for the average consumer and expect it to handle the edge cases that the military or critical infrastructure demands. You need to build for the hardest environment first, because that capability is what allows you to scale to everything else. The focus isn't on AI intelligence alone. It's on the robust, deployable platform that carries it. So, what should you take away from this massive injection of capital? Stop treating your product as a standalone piece of clever software. Instead, focus on making your platform inherently resilient and deployable in hostile or unpredictable environments. Build the scaffolding first, the kind that can survive a blackout, a jamming signal, or a sudden change in terrain. Because in the next phase of this industry, the barrier to entry isn't clever algorithms. It's proven operational toughness. Swedish legal AI startup Legora just slammed the door on skepticism by raising a massive $550 million Series D round, pushing their valuation up to $5.55 billion in just 5 months. That's a wild valuation jump, a triple whammy that shows capital chasing niche specialization, especially when the generalist models are starting to get sued. This isn't just a big check. It's a declaration that building specialized, domain-specific AI is still a lucrative, defensible play. This story lands right when the market is still digesting the legal fallout from the Nippon Life versus OpenAI suit, a case that is setting the stage for a landmark fight over whether a chatbot is legally allowed to practice law. The money coming in isn't just for scaling compute. It's for proving that the frontier labs, the ones building the massive, general-purpose LLMs, are not automatically equipped to handle the highly nuanced, rule-bound complexity of jurisprudence. They have the raw power, yes, but Legora is selling the productization story, the specialized legal model plus the human expert, wrapped up in a usable workflow. For us builders, this signals a crucial distinction between hype and defensible product. Don't assume that because an LLM can write passable code or summarize a court filing, that it has solved the underlying business problem. The sheer scale of a generalist model is a marketing asset, but a highly tuned, legally vetted, narrow model with deep integration into existing professional workflows, that is a moat. Legora is betting that the difficulty of integrating, auditing, and validating AI output in a regulated field like law is a higher barrier to entry than just throwing more parameters at the problem. They are making the case that the value isn't in the intelligence itself, but in the trust and the workflow built around the intelligence. This means that every vertical, from healthcare compliance to engineering specs, is going to start prioritizing depth over breadth. The lesson here isn't just for legal tech. It's for every founder building an enterprise solution. Stop trying to build the next GPT wrapper. Instead, focus ruthlessly on the single, complex, regulated process your customer currently performs with painful human effort, and build the narrowest, most compliant AI layer possible to solve that one thing perfectly. The money is flowing to the builders who can prove they are integrating into the messy reality of work, not just the clean abstraction of the API call. 46%. That's the number we need to talk about. Developer sentiment surveys are calling Claude Code the most loved AI coding tool, a massive jump that puts it miles ahead of Cursor, and frankly, puts it in a league Copilot just can't touch right now. This isn't some marginal improvement. This is a full-blown market dethroning, and it happened in a matter of months. You gotta understand the landscape here. For years, the narrative was simple. The AI coding assistant lives right inside your integrated development environment, the little autocomplete helper that whispers suggestions as you type. GitHub Copilot capitalized on that IDE-first model, bundling itself right into the corporate stacks, making it feel sticky, like a necessary utility. But the industry is moving past simple autocomplete. Developers are realizing that the real heavy lifting, the kind of complex, multi-step task that requires reasoning across files or interacting with a shell, isn't done in a fancy GUI text box. It's done in the terminal. The emerging pattern, the one that actually makes sense for shipping product, pairs a capable IDE tool, like Cursor, for the day-to-day edits, but it uses Claude Code in the terminal for the complex, agentic work. That's the critical difference. When you run a prompt in a terminal-native AI, you're not just getting code, you're getting a plan, and then you're getting the ability to execute that plan. You're moving from asking for a function to telling the AI to, say, go find all the services calling the old Stripe API endpoint, and update them to use the new payment gateway structure, then write the migration script. That requires statefulness, and that's where the terminal workflow shines. What this means for builders is that the battlefield just shifted away from the IDE pop-up and into the command line. Corporate bundling advantages, the kind that let GitHub Auto win just because they're already in the enterprise SSO, are suddenly much weaker. The satisfaction score, the actual developer delight, is pointing straight at the terminal experience. If your product relies on AI to handle complex workflows, you need to think about how deeply you can integrate that intelligence into the shell environment. You need to make the command line feel as intuitive and powerful as the modern GUI. Stop thinking about AI as a better autocomplete feature. Start thinking of it as a programmatic agent that lives in the terminal. If you want to keep your users building things, you have to build them a better command prompt. A 100-megawatt solar robot fleet, currently running on a software stack powered by NVIDIA's Isaac GR00T and Cosmos world models. That's the concrete image here, a massive physical system, doing complex, real-world work, but the bottleneck isn't the hardware, it's the code. NVIDIA just dropped these open models, and they're fundamentally shifting the development paradigm for robotics. For years, building an embodied agent, a robot that actually moves and does things, was a nightmare of bespoke hardware integration and expensive, dangerous real-world data collection. You needed to physically test everything, which is slow, costly, and often unsafe. This new stack, however, tackles that pain point head-on by turning the development process into something that looks and feels more like a typical software supply chain. By pairing the GR00T models, which allow robots to interpret natural language instructions and execute multi-step tasks, with Cosmos, which generates massive amounts of synthetic data, they're making the expensive process of training these agents much cheaper. What does this actually mean for us builders? It means the barrier to entry for advanced robotics just dropped significantly. We're talking about moving away from the idea that you need $1 million and a warehouse full of test rigs just to teach a robot a new skill. The system allows the robot to perform vision language action reasoning. Don't let that buzz phrase fool you. It just means the robot can take a command like, go to the south quadrant, find the blue wire, and connect it to the main junction, and figure out the steps, even if it's never seen that exact setup before. The Cosmos world models are the accelerant here. They let developers generate synthetic training data at scale, letting you test edge cases and failure modes in a digital twin environment before you ever risk a single dollar on a physical prototype. This isn't just a cool tech demo for National Robotics Week. This is a professionalization of the field. NVIDIA is essentially saying, stop thinking of robotics development as pure mechanical engineering and start treating it like advanced AI software development. The focus shifts from perfecting the actuator to perfecting the instruction set. The implication for us who are actually building things is that the computational layer, the AI models, and the synthetic data pipelines, is about to become the single most critical and most commoditized part of the entire robotic ecosystem. Get familiar with the data generation pipelines, because that's where the value is moving. BMG Rights Management just filed a federal copyright suit against Anthropic, alleging that their Claude model was trained on copyrighted lyrics from Bruno Mars, the Rolling Stones, and dozens of other BMG-controlled artists. This is a huge signal. It is the first major music publisher to launch a text lyrics copyright challenge directly against a frontier AI lab, setting up a parallel front to the ongoing legal battles involving Sony and UMG. Anthropic is now facing a trifecta of copyright issues, making music the third simultaneous legal battleground alongside the $1.5 billion Bart's author settlement and the related Reddit case. The legal landscape for generative AI models is getting incredibly messy, and it's moving faster than most of the models can keep up. These suits aren't just about whether a song snippet was used. They are about the fundamental rights inherent in the data used for training. BMG is effectively saying that the sheer scale of data ingestion, the scraping of millions of copyrighted works, crosses a line, regardless of the fair use defense the labs are currently relying on. These actions force the industry to confront the difference between inspiration and replication when it comes to creative assets. What does this mean for us who are actually building things? It means the compliance overhead for foundational models just jumped into the stratosphere. You can't just build a prompt wrapper and assume you're safe because the lawyers told you to. If the training data, the bedrock of the model's knowledge, is now viewed through the lens of copyrighted lyrics, then every single model needs an auditable, provable provenance for its training set. We are moving away from the idea of the black box model and toward models that must demonstrate lineage. For developers, this translates into a massive need for specialized data curation pipelines and licensing layers that cost money and require deep integration into the MLOps lifecycle. If you're building a commercial product that relies on natural language generation, you need to build in the legal guardrails before you ship, because the just good enough data approach is now a liability. The message from the music publishers is crystal clear. The value of the creative output hasn't diminished just because an AI can summarize it. The IP owners are going to fight tooth and nail to ensure they get paid for the data that powers the next generation of tools. Expect the focus to shift rapidly from purely technical capability to legally vetted, licensed capability. Builders need to anticipate that data sourcing will become the single most expensive and complex component of the AI stack. $2 billion. That's how much of the perceived revenue Anthropic, pronounced Anthropic, allegedly inflated, according to a leaked internal memo from OpenAI. This isn't some technical critique of a model architecture. This is a straight-up corporate accusation of accounting fraud, coupled with a character attack suggesting Anthropic's entire brand is built on fear. This kind of internal warfare, leaking financial and strategic dirt, shows that the AI race has officially moved past benchmark scores and into open warfare. For years, we've been fed the narrative that frontier AI development is a purely scientific, altruistic pursuit, the race to solve humanity's biggest problems. The industry has sold us the idea of a benevolent singularity. But this memo strips away that corporate polish. It suggests that the real battleground isn't the parameters of a model, it's the balance sheet and the public relations narrative. When major players are spending time leaking allegations of revenue inflation, it tells us that the immediate concern isn't capability, it's capitalization. The focus shifts from what can this AI do, to how much money can this company prove it has. What does this mean for us, the builders, who are trying to ship actual utility? It means the hype cycle is getting dangerously divorced from the actual product. We shouldn't be listening to the rhetoric about controlling the future or the philosophical weight of AGI. We need to be listening to the engineers who can deliver reliable APIs and predictable costs. When the conversation becomes about $8 billion in questionable accounting, or who controls the narrative of fear, it's a distraction. It forces us to look past the PR fluff and ask harder questions about fundamentals. Who has the most stable financial runway? Whose claims of market dominance are backed by auditable, clean numbers? A company that spends more time fighting its rivals in the press than it does iterating on core functionality is a liability to the ecosystem. This scramble for credibility, whether it's through leaked memos or through aggressive copyright settlements, is a signal that the era of pure, unadulterated technical progress is temporarily over. The next phase of building will require a much sharper focus on due diligence. We need to treat every major AI announcement, every breathless press release, not as a statement of technological inevitability, but as a highly suspect piece of marketing material. Focus on the demonstrable, measurable utility, and ignore the corporate melodrama. Capital One just announced a planned $5.15 billion acquisition of Brex, folding the decade-old corporate card and spend management startup into a full-stack retail bank. This isn't just another M&A headline. It's a clear signal that traditional finance is going to buy infrastructure instead of building it. This deal, slated for Q1 2026, places the former Brex founders directly inside a massive, legacy banking machine. This specific timing matters because it spotlights the pressure cooker that the broader financial infrastructure is in. We are seeing traditional banks treating AI-forward fintech capabilities as a commodity they can simply purchase. This move is one of the 5 largest tech M&A deals of the quarter, sitting alongside Savvy Games' $6 billion Moonton purchase. This isn't organic growth, it's a panic buy. The sheer scale of the Capital One/Brex transaction, compared to the Moonton buy, shows institutional desperation to appear modern. The real story here, though, is the ripple effect this sends across the market. It puts immediate, intense pressure on competitors like Ramp and Mercury. Those companies built their value on being the nimble, tech-first alternatives to the giant banks. Now, the giants have a billion-dollar solution waiting for them. They face a choice. Either accelerate their own product roadmap to match the acquired capabilities, or they need to decide whether to sell, scale aggressively, or risk getting boxed out of the value chain entirely. When you build a product, you depend on reliable rails. This acquisition suggests the rails, the payment rails, the spend management rails, are consolidating under the oldest, heaviest rails possible. What does that mean for us builders? It means that while the corporate doublespeak is about seamless integration and enhanced digital experiences, the underlying reality is that your cost of compliance and the required integration effort just went up. You have to build for the deepest, most regulated plumbing possible, regardless of how fast your product is. This isn't about customer experience. It's about balance sheets. This consolidation isn't about market efficiency. It's about risk mitigation for the bank's quarterly earnings report. For the people actually shipping products, this reinforces the need to build abstraction layers into your tech stack. Don't assume the rails will remain open or flexible. The future isn't built by the fastest startups. It's being engineered by the deep pockets who can afford to acquire and absorb entire product lines. Sygaldry just announced they raised $139 million. The pitch: quantum-accelerated AI servers designed to break the data center energy bottleneck. It sounds like science fiction, but they are betting it will exponentially speed up the critical algorithms powering frontier models while simultaneously slashing power draw. This isn't just another funding round. It's a direct challenge to the scaling assumptions that underpin today's AI infrastructure. Every major cloud provider, every company building a large language model, is running into the same wall: the sheer physics of computation. We're talking about power consumption that is becoming unsustainable, leading to exponential heat dissipation problems and massive operational expenditure for the people building the next generation of products. The current silicon roadmap, while impressive, is hitting diminishing returns when it comes to efficiency. The central claim here, that quantum acceleration can solve the data center energy crisis, is the part that requires the most skepticism. Quantum computing, in its pure form, remains highly specialized and notoriously difficult to stabilize outside of a controlled lab environment. What Sygaldry is selling, and what the market is buying into, is the promise of a specific, optimized hardware layer. If they can genuinely deliver a server architecture that processes complex AI algorithms with a significantly lower energy footprint than current GPUs, they change the cost equation entirely. For product builders, that means the difference between a viable deployment and an unmanageable CapEx nightmare. If their efficiency claims hold up, the barrier to entry for highly complex AI services drops dramatically, making advanced computation accessible to smaller, more nimble teams. However, the market is already saturated with companies promising quantum breakthroughs, and the history of hype cycles is littered with overhyped accelerators. The key metric for us, the builders, is not the quantum nature of the processing, but the measurable improvement in performance per watt. We need proof of concept that scales beyond the lab bench and into rack-mounted, real-world environments that run 24/7. If Sygaldry can validate their power efficiency claims at commercial scale, they force every major silicon vendor, ASML, TSMC, and the GPU giants, to accelerate their own roadmap timelines. The race isn't just about processing speed anymore. It's about thermodynamic efficiency. The next wave of truly disruptive AI products will belong to the teams that can manage the power bill, not just the compute load.
The air here carries the faint, sweet scent of pinyon pine smoke, drifting up from hearths that have been burning all day. It's a rich, smoky counterpoint to the sharp, metallic tang of the high desert sky, punctuated only by the deep, resonant chime echoing out from the Loreto Chapel. Right now, the deep blue dusk is washing over the Sangre de Cristos mountains, turning the adobe-lit facades a surprising shade of rose gold. This specific window, late April into May, is Santa Fe's undeniable sweet spot. It's the perfect convergence of culture and weather. You've got the Canyon Road Spring Art Festival kicking off on May 9th, with sculptors and potters working right inside those beautiful adobe galleries. Then, the Santa Fe International Literary Festival hits from May 15th to 17th, drawing crowds and conversation. And every Saturday morning, the Railyard Market wakes up, bringing 150 farmers and artisans under blooming cottonwoods. The timing matters because it signals a shift away from the spring break crowd. It's when the place really settles into its rhythm, showcasing its deep cultural core. This isn't a destination that merely looks like a place. It feels like a separate country, suspended at 7,200 feet. The market, for example, isn't just a quaint stroll, it's a necessary economic artery that keeps the local food culture vibrant. You can taste that history in the vibrant spread of chili red and chili green washed across every plate of Chico stew, a dish that anchors the entire experience. What really separates the experience from the glossy brochure is the sheer density of cultural activity. When you factor in the cost of staying, around $220 to $380 a night for an Adobe-style inn, the value is in the immersion. You are buying access to a life lived by the seasons. I was particularly struck by the silence you find between the bell strikes at the Loreto Chapel. It's a profound, almost jarring quiet that contrasts so sharply with the vibrant energy of the Railyard. This deep cultural resonance is the real commodity, not the fleeting art show. It's the contrast between the meticulous craftsmanship displayed in the galleries and the raw, immediate commerce happening at the market that defines the experience. This authentic foundation is something that cannot be manufactured, it is simply lived. If you're looking at the broader market, this sustained, multifaceted offering, art, literature, and daily life, is what makes it resilient. It's a consistent draw that pulls people back, year after year. The ability to experience this mix of profound silence and vibrant color, coupled with the delicious reality of northern New Mexican dinner for $30 to $50, makes it a powerful destination. The enduring draw here isn't just the beautiful architecture or the market bounty, it's the consistent promise of history colliding with the present. That promise is what keeps the heart of Santa Fe beating, waiting for the next visitor to taste the chili and hear the silence.